All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for attending our webinar today. My name is Ashley Limbers, and I'm the marketing lead at Encompass Solutions. At Encompass Solutions, we partner with organizations like yours, aiming to streamline business processes, automate your tasks, and optimize ROI. Our solutions integrate operations, minimizing tedious tasks and inefficiencies across all facets of your business. We are headquartered in North Carolina and have been in business for over 23 years with just over 40 staff members around the globe. One characteristic that makes Encompass Solutions stand out is that we are very partner focused. We have a certified team of consultants that partner with businesses like yours to help with ERP and EDI implementations, software enhancements, customizations, and reporting. Since becoming an Epicor partner in 2003 and a VAR partner in 2005, we have established ourselves as a premier Epicor partner. Our team includes consultants trained in Epicor's implementation methodology, ensuring consistency and quality in our services. We maintain a strong collaborative relationship with Epicor, as you'll see today, functioning seamlessly as a united team with a single point of accountability. We are recognized as the go-to partner for Epicor Kinetic, and we are committed to delivering exceptional solutions to support our clients. And today we are discussing Epicor Financial Planning Analysis presented by Brad Basden, Epicor Senior Director, Solutions Engineer. Just a few things before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be emailed to you. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel and we'll bring them up during our Q&A session at the end. And we also encourage you to take the survey after today's event. Now, without further ado, we'll turn our time over to Brad. Brad has been with Epicor for over 20 years, working in both the department and sales groups. He currently manages the technical solutions engineer, Cirrus upgrade, and cloud pre-sales teams at Epicor. And at Epicor, Brad has been involved in most of the technical elements of Kinetic and Vantage, such as BPMs, functions, BAQs, dashboards, customizations, Service Connect, App Studio, Configurator, and CPQ. Brad was instrumental in the Automation Studio launch and is excited for the possibilities it opens for Epicor customers. So with that, Brad, over to you.
Hey there. Today we'll be talking about Epicor FP&A, or Financial Planning and Analysis. I'll cover the key capabilities, or what it focuses on, the different licensing options, and the bulk of this will actually be a live demo with all of the various capabilities highlighted, possibly some others, depending on how much we have time for. And as Ashley mentioned on the Q&A side, please include any questions in the Zoom chat, and I'll address them as I go through the live demo, if I can, or if not, I'll address them at the end with any examples, or of course, if it's something that we can't answer, then by all means, reach out and we will follow up with any calls or additional meetings. All right, as a starting point, so that we're all on the same page with what FP&A can do, it is primarily focused on general ledger reporting, budgeting and forecasting, and consolidations. Now, it can do a lot more than that, but we also have other solutions that can do other things as well. So just because you can do certain things in FP&A doesn't mean that's the only place that you can do them, or that that is the best place to do them. And I'll talk about that as I show different examples. First, on the general ledger reporting side, we do like to say that's value add starting from day one, because part of implementation includes creating reports. It is not just turn on a module and hand you the keys to a blank slate and tell you to do everything for yourself. You can, of course, do things for yourself once the environment is available, but from day one of the environment being turned over to you, you would have, at a minimum, functioning income statements, balance sheets, trial balance, and statement of cash flows. You can be one of each or multiple versions of each. As far as those financial statements go, you can create more of anything that's in the system, again, income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, trial balance, or any of the existing financial statements can be copied and modified. So you're not limited to just one of each. And it does have web-based reporting capability and Excel-based reporting capability. So both of those options are included. You can use whichever version you like. That will make more sense as we go on. On the budgeting and forecasting side, think of the Excel budget templates that many of us have used before, and just imagine those being in the browser. Same look and feel. I'll show examples of what that looks like. You can also have scenarios like actual budget forecast, pretty common scenarios, but you're not limited to just that. You could have forecast 1, forecast 2, and so on. Finally, for consolidations and consolidated financial reporting, that can be on companies or legal entities that are in Epicor, as well as companies or legal entities that are not in Epicor. Could be from any other system you can get a trial balance from. Even at the enterprise level, there's the option of communicating directly with other systems. That can be on the Epicor side, an on-prem Epicor instance and a cloud Epicor instance. It can be multiple companies on one instance, pretty much any variation you can come up with. Finally, for the rules and that consolidations process, that can be run in FP&A, including the ability to do things like have customizable rules, top-line journal entries, reconcile your intercompany eliminations, and so on, which I'll also show examples of live. For the licensing options, takeaway is reports only, which is financial statements and reports. Basic, which is financial statements and reports plus budgeting. Standard, which would be everything to the left, plus additional companies or legal entities, and the option of adding on modules, which I'll get into a little bit. And finally, the enterprise level, which is GL reporting and other data as well by default or all in, plus potentially advanced consolidations. We'll talk about that a little bit, as well as automatically including the add-on modules. And for switching over to the demo, give me 1 second. And Ashley, can you confirm that you're seeing an Epicor homepage on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And audio is still coming through okay for you?
You sound great.
All right, perfect. Thanks very much. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I don't know why, but financial reporting is a passion of mine. I have books on Excel reporting and charts and dashboards. I get them autographed by the authors because I go to their seminars to talk to them. It's something that captures my interest. Not everybody has to have that same level of passion. Either way, the solution we'll talk about today makes things so much easier. It does a lot of things that I really ask myself, why hasn't it always worked this way? And I've been doing financial reporting and financial analysis, decision support analyst, roles like that for 20 plus years. And there's a lot of capabilities in what our solution can do now that we didn't used to have, other companies haven't had before. It makes things much easier. For starters, I'm in my Epicor browser-based Kinetic homepage. But again, this solution can work with on-prem instances or cloud-based instances. It can work with Epicor, whether you're on the browser, like I am now, with an on-prem instance, browser-based cloud instance, smart client, E10 database, kineticized database. It doesn't matter. As long as it's 10.1.400, I believe. I'll have to double check that exact version number, but FP&A can work with anything above and beyond that. One of the reasons I really like this Kinetic Active homepage, I can have shortcuts to FP&A. So how does it work from an architecture standpoint? FP&A is a separate web-based data warehouse. I can impersonate different users. If I'm an admin, which I am, so I'm going to promote myself to CEO. As you see, I now have access to different data that I didn't have access to a moment ago. I could do the same for any of the other users. For time's sake today, we'll stick with just being CEO. The reports that I have access to are directly listed here on my dashboard. I can have charts and graphs on EBITDA, revenue, profit and loss, cash flow. Those can be bar charts, line charts. I potentially could have other data like receivables and payables. Those are technically not GL, but would be optional add-on modules or those add-on packs. However, even just from a general ledger standpoint, I still have plenty of things that I can work with. Again, at a minimum, one each of your standard financial statements. So income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, trial balance. In my demo data set, I have multiple reports as examples that we'll look at. I also have budget templates, which I mentioned before would be similar to Excel budget templates in a web browser. So we'll look at examples of that. For starters, how it works from an architecture perspective, FP&A would connect to your Epicor instance and automatically refresh every night, no matter what. Nobody has to do anything. It also has a synchronize button. So if you have entries during the day that are posted that you need reflected in that web-based data warehouse, you can hit synchronize once a day, multiple times a day. It uses what's called adds, updates, deletes, or incremental updates. So it's not pulling in your entire multi-megabyte, multi-gigabyte Epicor database. It is just pulling over, at a minimum, general ledger data, but also not all your general ledger data every single time, just what changed since the last refresh, which worst case scenario was a few hours ago. So a very small amount of data, very fast updates, matter of just a few minutes at most of pulling over that updated data, refreshing the data warehouse, and all of the reports, charts, and graphs refer to the web-based data warehouse for any information. So they all essentially stay up to date. You no longer need manual update of versions of Excel files that have hundreds or potentially thousands of formulas in those that have to be refreshed by hand and can only be done by opening with a connection to the database and an add-in. The web-based versions of these reports do have drill down capabilities as well as filtering capabilities. If you have multiple entities or multiple companies, that hierarchy would be included in FP&A. You can pick a different level of the roll-up or a specific entity. Same goes for your segments. Could be department, division, business unit, cost center, profit center, whatever your segments are. And time, of course, would be on almost every report, but you have the option of what's included or not. Those filters are very much like Excel's drop-down filters or data validation lists. You can control what's included and shown and what's not. The reports themselves, the row and column versions, are essentially multi-dimensional reports, not a report I have to build formulas one cell at a time for. I'll show you more about what that means in the edit screen. But if you look at this particular report, I don't see an account number here. It's because this is a roll-up or summary level report, which means there's multiple account numbers that tie out to that 29,240. I can drill down by account number to show those account number by account number details, ties out to 29,240. I can export that to Excel. I can see that same information for divisions, departments, or whatever my segments are. I can also drill even further all the way to the general ledger line item detail. This is the information that is really driving everything. So this is what's being pulled from Epicor and is what's in the database warehouse. And it's what is behind the scenes for all of these reports. And it is the incremental data that would be added. So only net new lines that show up need to be synchronized. Otherwise, everything stays up to date. One thing that I will add, depending on your Epicor installation, you could even have a shortcut or a way to get back into Epicor. For example, something like this, where I have my segments, account, division, department. This says AR 10229. That's an invoice. Open source is a link that appears. Notice it will disappear on this line because that does not say AR or AP, does not have a transaction number. If this line item drill down doesn't give me the information that I need, I can click open source, which would take me back into Epicor. It embedded the invoice number into the URL. What that means is if you're using the kinetic interface and the browser-based screens, which can open with a URL, not that you only use those, but if those work for you, and again, that's on-prem or cloud-based, but this type of drill down could work for you to take you back into Epicor to find the information that you're looking for about that transaction. It put in the invoice number for me. This is the kinetic screen with collapsible cards. This gives me all my details about that invoice, the line items here, which are clickable. I'm back in Epicor now, so I could go anywhere from here. If I have Epicor document management or Epicor content management, I would see a red dot by that paperclip. If I had the attachment here, that also gives me the activity tab because this is a tracker. So everything's read only. And in Kinetic, in this browser-based screen, I have context-sensitive right-click functionality. So if I right-click on this order cell here, I get one set of choices, something I might want to drill to. If I expand my GL transactions card, right-click here in GL account, I get a different set of choices. So that makes it much, much easier to find out any information that I'm looking for related to a particular transaction or line item. Also, depending on what information is being brought in, I can have additional information easily accessible inside of that drill to journal. So for that particular invoice, I can see many line items of detail from other modules. Again, some of that would be dependent on things like AR and or AP data being included. Totally up to you on what licensing level would be appropriate for your needs. For the reports themselves, however, you're not limited to just one of each report. I can have multiple versions of reports that could also include something like a 12-month view income statement as opposed to the single period actual versus budget from the first page. I'll leave this open for a moment because we'll need it on the budgeting and forecasting side of things. Something else that could be particularly helpful when it comes to consolidated financials, a balance sheet with companies as columns. So something like this has a company, a company, a company, a company. Each of those columns is a company with my intercompany eliminations. I can also have 12-month views of balance sheets. I can have the companies be a drop-down filter, like on my actual versus budget income statement. This is just one example of other ways that the statements can be formatted. Just about anything you could imagine doing by hand in Excel could also be created here. If you do have one legal entity and no others, that's okay too. These column-based views could also be used for divisions. So it could be division, 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 department, 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 or whatever your segments happen to be. So you're not limited to just one column like actuals or actual versus budget. There's many different ways that you can see different types of reports and have different views. Actually, I will close that just to save tabs because I don't need this. I don't need this. But I will leave that first report open that we started with. I want to mention a couple of things about the reports themselves and the users. First, on the reports themselves, if you look at the lower left part of my browser screen, you'll see different URLs or different links for each report. Each report is a link. That means that I can bookmark individual reports if it's something that I use frequently. That can come from my Kinetic Active homepage. I could have different links. It could be browser bookmarks. It's browser agnostic. So I can have multiple reports as links without having to go to FP&A first and then pick the report from the list. In terms of who can do that, because just having that link does not give me access to the report, it is based on users. essentially all users start off being created as equal. It's not different prices for different users based on what they can access. You could have one administrator, multiple administrators, but an administrator can control for the users what groups exist and who's in what group, what roles exist and what roles each of those users have, and all the way down to an individual user level, what data that user has access to. So Howard here can have access to different types of data in the system. Of course, mine is as a demo system at more of the enterprise level of data access. And on the reports, access to individual reports can be controlled. Of course, the combination of data access and report access and capabilities around who can do what, such as for roles and who has different roles, features access, like drill down capability or creating new reports, things like that can get very, very granular. But you as the customer and as an administrator would have the ability to address who can access what and control that from your side, not something that needs a support ticket or purchasing a different type of license to have view only access versus edit access or things like that. So now that we've covered how it connects to the data, how the users work, who can access what, and as you saw at the beginning, different users can have different access to different dashboards, different screens, and this individual report that I opened, plus the dashboards are configurable as well, and the budget templates can be controlled. I'll show an example on the individual report side of things. So we did a drill down. The reports themselves, I mentioned, are not the type you have to create one cell at a time or copy formulas or anything like that. It is considered a multi-dimensional web-based data warehouse. For that, the dimensions themselves would be segments like department and division, time, accounts. So all of those things can be included in reports as long as the data is in the system. You can have formulas like comparisons, variance, percent by amount, actual versus budget versus forecast, custom formulas at the bottom of the report based on what's on the report, not things that necessarily need to be in Epicor. And any of these reports, since we talked about users and access, can be shared. If I'm sharing with one of the first 4 users who are licensed users of the system, it would just send a link, which is this link to that report based on whatever I put at the bottom of the screen here and hit share. Because they are licensed users of the system, they have access to the report unless they're not supposed to. And in that case, it wouldn't let them access the report, even if they had the link. This last user is an external user. That would be somebody who's not licensed to use the system. If they went to this link, because everybody has to be logged in, it would not work for them. They couldn't log into the system at all for accessing different screens that I've pulled up already in here. So that external user, I can still share a report with, and I'll explain how in just a moment, but I also want to show the sharing can be done on a scheduled or recurring cadence. So manual, daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. But for sharing with an external user, somebody who does not have access to the system, it is the same version of the report as an Excel attachment. So this up here on the left is my web-based report. This right here is my Excel-based report. This is what it would send to an unlicensed user of the system if I were to share that report. It sends this as an email attachment. I can also, of course, export this to Excel on my own just for backup purposes. This would not have any formulas, even in the subtotals. So this is very useful for backup purposes. If I want something with no formulas that I don't have to worry about changing, it's the type of thing that could be sent to financial institutions, to auditors. That's the format they would want things in so that they can leverage that data. The numbers are numbers. So it's not this type of scenario where I export to Excel and the numbers are general or text. I can just say A minus B, and that works. So everything there is usable and it will stay just like it is. And as you saw, the formatting, the cell borders, the colors, the column widths, all of that is already done for me, which is a huge time saver. That's something I normally used to assume if I export to Excel, I have to redo that every single time. No longer need to do that. On top of that, if I did want to have a formula-based version of that report, there are a couple of add-ins from FP&A. The most recent for Microsoft 365 will let me pull the list of reports that I have access to. I'm already logged in as my demo user here. If I click on that same report that we looked at on the web-based side of things, I can see here department, division, time, same filters that I had. So it will mirror whatever filters were there. I can change something beforehand if I want, or after I create this. But for now, I'm just going to hit insert report and not do anything. I will let the FP&A add-in create the entire report for me. It is going to duplicate the web-based version, just like export to Excel, but this will be all formula-based. For those formulas, column widths, colors, cell borders, everything. It's all done for me based on the existing report already in the web-based data warehouse. Think of that as the repository or the system of record for the reports. It's just pulling in a formula-based version of that. Again, I can change the filters afterwards. I can save this report. You can have multiple tabs with multiple reports. You can do whatever I want, still have all the same Excel capabilities that I'm used to. There is technically a get value formula. If I did want to do the old school method of putting in parameters or values, putting in a formula, copying that down, copying that across, the multiple copies and pastes, one cell at a time formulas, I would be very, very hesitant to have anyone do that when this other option is available. Granted, it's a new system, it's a new way of doing things, this multi-dimensional view versus one cell at a time, but I can promise that in 99% of use cases, it would be much, much faster. It seems counterintuitive to build it in the web-based environment first and then pull it in. But if you were equally skilled in both tools, it would be significantly faster, 2 to 3, maybe 10 times faster to create it in the web-based environment first and then just pull it into Excel. It's also reusable, so it's not a one-time creation of a report, which is then not repeatable. In addition, this multi-dimensional approach for reporting not only allows me multiple views of the same type of report, but if I did want to have another version of this report, I could just make a copy of it. I would argue that this is as useful, if not more useful, than being able to create a new report. I will show in a moment what it looks like to create a new report. But if you think about creating a new report, that means you still have to go and do the formatting, any additional configuration. Well, if that's already done here, or if that's already done in the 12-month view that I looked at, much faster to just make a copy and then change the copy. I don't break my original. I don't have to start from scratch. In terms of what I can change in edit mode, just like in Excel, if I go into edit mode, I don't have to change anything. I can just close without saving, and I haven't broken anything. So I'll go into edit mode in my existing report just to show how it looks at those different fields like actual versus budget. Those are scenarios. The rows that I have here, there's a couple of different ways that those appear. The dimensions, that would be like account. So my income statement accounts, my balance sheet accounts. FP&A understands the difference between those. Things like entity. If I have multiple entities, that can be a checkbox filter. If I have one entity, I can just uncheck that box because I don't have multiple entities to pick from. Department, division, whatever my segments are, would be dimensions, and those can be filters, or I can turn them off. Scenario actual, that's turned off because I have them on the report as columns, actual, budget, forecast. I can have that be a dropdown. for the columns themselves. One-to-one relationship, actual, budget, variance, blank. Even my blank placeholder, that's a column. In edit mode, I can create, edit, remove, or duplicate columns. Very similar on the row side of things, depending on what type of report I'm looking at. This particular report, I can still add new rows, edit, remove, duplicate, group, ungroup, and so on. But these rows here were not individually added one at a time. These were actually pasted in after a new report was created and the account dimension was removed with individual row names, but all pasted in at once from an Excel report, the type of Excel report many of us have seen where you have these row names, and then off to the side, you might have a hidden or grouped column with, for example, account numbers that correspond to this row, account numbers that correspond to this row, and so on. So there is a streamlined way of creating reports from Excel versions originally and copying and pasting row names and things like that to make it much faster to duplicate that report. However, I will say as part of implementation, at least one version of each of those reports would be created for you. So you don't necessarily have to create any reports on your own unless you want to create your own reports. Totally up to you what level that would be. Create all your own reports. As long as the first one's there, you can. Create none of your own reports. That's okay too. Or somewhere in between, like most of us would be. I'll create a new report in a moment and show you this difference. But if it's the type of thing where I see this, if it's my own general ledger, I'll know what this refers to. But if I'm new to the company, I might not recognize what accounts this corresponds to. I can see right here, essentially as a drill down in my income statement hierarchy here, my income statement accounts, that sales service machine, what accounts fall under that row. So it makes it really easy to look at what those rows correspond to. I don't necessarily have to pick and choose those individually or work with them individually because it was all pasted in one fell swoop. Also, if I go back to create a new report, which is right here, that one caveat that I mentioned, the data has to be in the system, which makes sense, but it's because the system prompts me base rows on what? Well, in this case, income statement or income statement accounts, the account dimension versus balance sheet accounts. FP&A knows the difference. I also have other data in my system, sales data, accounts receivable, accounts payable, fixed assets, and so on. At a minimum, every system would have the financials, which is general ledger financials. I'm not going to change anything. I'll just go with the default of the account dimension, income statement. I'll add year to date as just an optional checkbox, just to have something more on the report. Takes just a few seconds to create a new report. There's actual versus budget, which were the default comparisons. The year to date checkbox that I checked shows actual and budget year to date. This particular report is a detail level report or one account per row, as opposed to a roll up level report, which had one row instead of a grouping or subtotal for this. But it's up to me what I do with this now. This is creating a new report. I still have all the same options and capabilities. If I go into edit mode, I will see under columns, my same one-to-one relationship, actual budget, the 2 year to date. For rows, I will see something different. In this case, I just see one row account. What that means is show the account dimension on the report, whatever is in there. This is information that is being pulled over from Epicor. I could then do things with this report to make it look like the other report, the summary level report that we looked at. But what is leveraging here for this account dimension, because this is a multi-dimensional web-based data warehouse, if I go and look at my dimensions, I can see for the account dimension, there's that same view that I had. There's my financials or my general ledger financials. That account dimension there has all of my income statement accounts, my balance sheet accounts. This is being pulled from Epicor, but it is initially built out by the FP&A implementation resources as part of implementation. So step one is create that web-based data warehouse. Step two, connect to Epicor data. Step 3, create the users. Step 4, start creating reports based on customer requirements, typically because the customers will provide versions of their financial reports that are currently in use, unless they hate said versions, and then something different can be created, but that is totally up to you. This structure here, this multi-dimensional structure, the account dimension, is typically synchronized with Epicor. So it's pulling account numbers, account names, account categories, and groupings from Epicor. And if something changes in Epicor, if it's synchronized, that would flow into FP&A. You can also have potentially other types of account mappings that are not in Epicor, or hybrid account mappings, proxy type account mappings, the things we might have in the past created a mapping table in Excel for and then use lookups to create a report for. No need to do that. I can have additional account mappings exist side by side with my original account mappings. I can also have other types of categories and custom hierarchies. Some of those things, of course, are dependent on what data is there, licensing, and things like that. But the system overall, from a technical standpoint, very, very flexible in terms of what it can do, what views you can create. You can have different ways of looking at the data. And in terms of the receivables and payables that I mentioned as being optional add-ons depending on license type, the reports themselves are also not limited to just those 4 types, or income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow, trial balance. There can be reports such as sales reports, just standard row and column type reports, in addition to the charts and graphs that I showed earlier on those dashboards. So they can be quantity based, they can be revenue based, many different options around what types of reports can exist in the system. The catch is, just has to be the right configuration and licensing, and an FP&A resource has to incorporate or ingest the data at first so that reports can be created on it. Anything a report can be created on from the data warehouse, you can have charts and graphs on it, you can have reports on it. Any reports that exist, you can have Excel versions of reports. So it is a full spectrum of capability for web-based and Excel-based reporting, as well as dashboards, charts, and graphs. And again, I mentioned there are many things FP&A can do. It is not primarily designed as a BI/BA, or business intelligence, business analytics type of platform. It is primarily built for general ledger reporting, budgeting and forecasting, and consolidations. That doesn't mean it can't do those things, but we do have solutions built for business intelligence, business analytics, especially on the operations side. Our operations type of solution can do great dashboards and great visualizations, but it doesn't understand income statement accounts versus balance sheet accounts. It doesn't understand, budget templates or budget assumptions. It doesn't understand intercompany eliminations or currency rate conversions. Those are things specific to FP&A. In terms of budgeting and forecasting, when I talk about those Excel budget templates, it could look something like this. This is just one example. You're not locked into any particular or specific formats or layouts. It is based on customer requirements and what your current budget and forecast process is, or what you want it to be if you don't have one. If you are using Epicor for budgeting, for example, using the import-export budgets, standard type of Excel template that functionality has existed for years for in Epicor, it can pull that. But if you want to use FP&A for budgeting and forecasting, because it can do much more than the native or embedded Epicor functionality, then FP&A would be the system of record for all the budget and forecast data, because it can include things like comments on individual cells, workflows, which I'll talk about, scenarios, which we've touched on, but I'll talk about even more, as well as various types of budget templates known as assignments in FP&A. Can be things like revenue accounts with interactive or updatable cells. That's these cells in yellow, which I can change directly in this on-screen template. It's things like the system updating annual amounts on a month by month basis for prorated spreads. So if I take this, I have the same number each month, and I want to uplift this to a larger annual number. It'll apply that run rate. If this is something separate, where that period is different than all the other periods, and each period can be different, and I change this value, it will apply the proportional increase or decrease by period automatically. That's for annualized numbers. It can also create predictions for me. So if I turn on my visualization, I have a create prediction button here. If I have reliable historical data to create a prediction from, which this is demo data, so may or may not be reliable, but in real life, your data would be much more reliable. The system can create predictions. This is where the machine learning component comes in, because it has multiple statistical models. For example, it would tell me which model had the best fit, what level of fit it had. It's up to me on if I use that prediction or not. I can create additional scenarios with those different predictions. I have other assumptions that are incorporated. I can have P times Q type calculations. So for example, these 5,000 are my COS or COGS accounts. Notice they're not yellow because I can't edit those. So for something like that, it's based on calculations in the template and how the template was built. You, of course, would not have to build these templates yourself, but they are modifiable. But they can have calculations around how those numbers are created. You can have assumptions. It's not all strictly revenue or, dollar amount or monetary based. So for example, percentage or numeric types of assumptions. This could be an input sheet. Notice these are all yellow, so I can change these. Could be benefits or rate per head type calcs or assumptions. Seasonality, like business days per month, if that might affect things. Any types of assumptions that you want that are linked to various values in the dimensions. So these could be specific account groupings in those dimensions. Could be customer specific, could be supplier or vendor specific, could be product specific. Many, many different options there. Could be as granular as by customer, by product ID. So not every organization necessarily wants to get this granular, but I have, for example, customers here. I have individual calculations. Notice these are in white, so I can't edit these. Where did they come from? If I right click here, you'll notice it will open a new tab for me. When I click on enter product quantity, that was under Barriston Engineering. These are my product IDs. These, which are yellow, meaning they're editable, are quantity by product ID, by customer, that's for that customer, by period. I can take run rate amounts, change that, right? It would do prorated distributions of that. I can have individual amounts. I can paste in, I can type, I can edit, just about anything I could think of. In terms of granularity, I could base this on other data. There could be calculations around how this is used, but this for one customer by product ID would roll up to that row, customer overall, and all customers together would roll up to be part of that overall budget and forecast process. For budgets and forecasts, those are considered scenarios. Budget, forecast, actual is a scenario. At a minimum, you might have actual, forecast, and budget. You could also have different revisions of budgets and forecasts. You can add to those scenarios, duplicate scenarios. You can have a scenario for a pandemic. We wouldn't necessarily have had that 5 years ago, but you can have one or more of those now. And all of those scenarios would be captured on the report, either as columns or as a drop-down filter. So if I go back to my 12-month view, one of the reasons this is particularly useful, I have scenario. So I can pick any of the scenarios, apply that to the whole report, and I have time. In this case, a specific year. So that is actuals for last year. If I'm doing budgeting and forecasting in FP&A, and I wanted a report that looked like this, but was budget for next year or forecast for next year, I don't have to keep reusing this report and keep changing it every single time or permanently change this report. I could just go back to what we talked about before, make a copy. In the copy, I could change scenario in edit mode to budget or forecast. I could change time to 2025. And then I have my entire report that is still the 12-month view that I wanted. And you can also have, trailing or rolling 12-month, 13-month, not limited, just calendar based. But a flexible layout, multiple versions of reports. I don't have to break my original. If I use make a copy, I don't have to create it from scratch. If I use a new report and then change it. So very, very efficient use of report creation. And again, I don't have to manually open and refresh all the different reports that I have to keep them up to date. They essentially stay up to date all the time by themselves without me having to do anything. And that
Brad,
brings us
can
to,
I,
go ahead.
sorry, can I stop you for a second? We had a question come in and you might have
Please.
already answered it.
Nope,
So
no
the
problem.
question is, are there ways to incorporate fixed assets, asset life, depreciation, and et cetera in this system?
Yes, there's absolutely a way to incorporate fixed assets. By default, depending on the licensing type, it could be an add-on pack, fixed assets data for the standard license level. There may be other ways to incorporate fixed asset data and depreciation, depending on what you want to include and how you want to use it, that may not necessarily need that standard license and the add-on pack. So for something like that, I would recommend, just because I don't even have access to pricing, I know what the licensing is, but some of it depends on your specific use case. So definitely reach out to your account representative to get a discussion set up. And I and or an Epicor resource in conjunction with Encompass will happily get on a call and talk through what it is you want to do, how that works in FP&A, what can be done depending on different licensing levels, and what granularity of information you want to use for like fixed assets and depre and things like that. Great question though. Thank you. Same goes for like AR and AP data. AR and AP could include customers, suppliers, things like that. That all can potentially tie together. So AR, AP, fixed assets, budgeting and forecasting, entities, individual general ledger reports with consolidated financials. So the third and last topic for FP&A and what it focuses on, consolidated financials. If you have multiple legal entities, again, in and or out of Epicor, those can be reported on in FP&A. The consolidations process can be run in FP&A. There's literally a button for it. The button for consolidations has configurable business rules and order of operations with what would happen when running consolidations. In this case, foreign exchange rate conversions, current year net income calculations, and so on. Could even be, and your intercompany eliminations, could even be addressing intercompany imbalances due to fractional percentage differences from currency exchange rate conversions. In other words, things that are less than a penny, fractions of a penny, when you're trying to address things like that. You'll notice on all my reports that everything has been in one currency. It absolutely recognizes multiple currencies and exchange rates, whether consolidations is in scope or not. But there are different licensing levels for multiple currencies on the reporting surface or on the screen. In other words, having a drop down or a toggle where I can look at a report in US dollars and then click a button and look at the same exact report in euros. There is that capability, depends on the licensing type. Not everyone needs it, but the system can do it. From a consolidation standpoint, being able to run that process also allows me to identify intercompany eliminations where things may or may not be the same. Think stoplight approach, red light, green light. Green light, everything's copacetic. Here's the green light differences, which are nil. Red light differences, 690K, I could almost guarantee that there's a missing entry. The entry in one of the other entities is not there. So it can help with identifying those differences. You can have top line journal entries, which would be journal entries for consolidated financial reporting purposes that are not specifically part of the general ledger of one of these subsidiaries. Subsidiaries for that hierarchy could be, all siblings, parent child, grandparent, parent child, and so on. It is based on configurable settings and business rules, identifying what the intercompany accounts are, handling those accounts in different ways depending on what type of account it is, handling different exchange rates. So a common example for multi-currency reporting and foreign exchange rates for consolidated financials would be income statement accounts using an average period balance versus balance sheet accounts using an end of period balance. FP&A can handle including situations like that. Spoke with a customer a week or so ago that was trying to do that type of thing by hand in Excel with consolidated financials, but ended up just going with, I don't remember which one they picked, if it was average or ending, but they used the same for both income statement and balance sheets. And it wasn't a huge difference, but even though they knew it wasn't mathematically accurate, just because it was so much work to do it two different ways, FP&A will let you do it two different ways. Not a problem. You can identify balance sheet accounts one way, income statement accounts another way, as you saw in my dimensions hierarchy under account. You can also have dividend accounts, goodwill, equity accounts be addressed a certain way for consolidations and eliminations. All of these things are configurable, but not things you are expected to configure on your own. At a minimum, that would be built out during implementation based on your input and or collaboration, but not something you would be building out on your own as part of that. And then part of the business rules around that, in addition to the configuration, those settings can also include various calculations around benefits, rate per head calcs, as I mentioned before, being able to include different capabilities, formulas, modifiers, parameters, values, assumptions, P times Q, you name it. It can incorporate just about anything you want to automate and streamline the various reporting and or consolidation needs that you might have. Could be HR related, could be foreign exchange rate converted related, cash flow related, just about anything that you can imagine, but also, again, not things you would be expected to put in yourself, things that you can incorporate based on collaboration with an FP&A implementation resource. And from my side, that covers all three of the primary capabilities of FP&A and what it's for. There's significantly more detail than that from a reporting and data standpoint. So if you're interested in more, definitely reach out. Are there any questions that I wasn't able to see come in, Ashley?
Not at this time.
Okay. One thing I will add from a data standpoint, because I show this system all the time. Again, I've been using Excel for pretty much all of this for 20 years now. Things like export to Excel and the formatting already being done and creating reports with one click instead of 100 or more formulas per tab, per worksheet. That would probably have saved, out of the past 20 years, like a year or two of my life, maybe more, probably more. That's a conservative estimate, but that's a game changer. Just being able to have that same Excel capability, but not have to do everything one cell at a time, not have to create all those individual reports one cell at a time. One other thing I will include here, since we have just a couple of minutes left, is query or custom query functionality comes up very, very often. even though I did mention that FP&A is focused on general ledger reporting, but it can do other things, it does have a pretty fantastic add-in, especially this FP&A add-in for Excel 365, the Microsoft 365 version. So for something like that, it does use this add-in. I do have to be logged in. However, I don't need that list of reports. This is functionality that's not a report. It's just using one of the formulas in the FP&A add-in for, in this case, Epicor BAQs or business activity query. It's just a SQL view or just a view of some data in Epicor. So for something like this, I'm just going to pull a list of all my BAQs really quickly. So I have several hundred. You do not have to have all of your BAQs in Epicor be exposed. This way I have them all turned on because it's a demo system. But also there's one particular one that I know works, the purchase price variance, BAQ. Should have just one of them, but I want to get the syntax exactly right because, you know, in Excel formulas, if you're off by one character, it's the same as being off by every character. So for something like this, FP&A has a formula called get BAQ. I can pull in the results of an Epicor BAQ directly into Excel just like that. It was a matter of a few seconds to get that. So this is directly from Epicor, my Epicor database. I did not have to prime my data warehouse with this or populate my data warehouse with this data. It is just pulling this over directly. It is not limited to GLARAP. It is just a pull of Epicor BAQ data. It is one way, it's read only. It's not editing or deleting anything in Epicor. It's not sending anything back and forth. It's just a direct pull of some results. So if there are any Epicor BAQs that could potentially be useful to have in Excel as a formula, as opposed to a static export, like where you might export from Epicor into Excel format and you just have rows and columns of numbers. I mean, I could go here and copy and paste those numbers into another sheet, but I still have my formula-based view right here. The formula-based view is still interactive. I can still go here and do formatting as needed. I can do the same thing with dollars, with units. If there's something in Epicor that's a BAQ being used in Epicor and I want a different version in Excel, I can just copy it in Epicor and reference that Excel specific version, but I can do things once it's in here, including formatting, like Excel's auto filter. So something like that. I might have, you know, Seaside Steel, right? I can filter just fine. It's Excel's auto filter, nothing special, because I can see the blue row numbers here, meaning it's just hiding the rows that are not applicable. They're still there. I'm not breaking any formulas. I didn't get hashtag ref, hashtag, you know, name or error when I did something like that. And these are still referenceable. So I can say that plus that, and it works just fine. So I will end on that note because I know we're right at time.
Yep. And we have another question.
I'll go for it.
Yep. Is the consolidation link in the business model section a license add-on? I'm not seeing it in my current business models section.
The consolidation link, it may take a follow-up question, but FP&A from a licensing standpoint will handle consolidations for all licensing levels. It does not necessarily mean directly connecting to multiple legal entities. It could be importing a trial balance from another entity, could be based on configuration. Also, if it's an EFP or you know, the prior branding of what FP&A was called, there may be some differences there. So definitely reach out to your account manager about what's there. But from a licensing standpoint, it handles consolidations for all licensing types.
Great. That was a good question. Another question. I definitely need the GL reporting side of things, but can I create reports with custom queries?
Yes, custom queries. You can definitely use the get BAQ functionality in Excel. And theoretically, the BAQ functionality will be extended. It's on the product roadmap to also be able to pull BAQ results into the web-based interface, which is pretty cool. I'm excited about that. Hasn't been released yet, so I haven't been able to play with it, but it's definitely one thing I'm looking forward to coming up in the next release.
Great. It looks like we have covered all of our questions. If you do have another question before we go today, please be sure to type that into the question box on your control panel. Brad, or did you finish all of the slides that you were going to go over?
The three topics. Yes, actually, there's
Ryan?
one more.
Okay.
Let me share. Thank you for pointing that out. So I will show the ending slide that we have. Flipping back over to that. And that would be
Oh, perfect.
our contact info.
Yes. So if you have any more questions, you can email support@Encompass or reach out to your CAM, Lynn, and we also have a resource here for 10 reasons why you should choose Epicor FP&A. So download or scan the QR code to download that resource. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover before we go today?
That covers all the topics I had on my list. Thank you for your
Okay,
time.
great. Yeah, thank you so much. This was very insightful, very good. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.